So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole, Monday, March the 6th, 2017 in Council Chambers. So we'll call the meeting to order at 9 o'clock. And is there introduction of late items? Is there anything else to be added to the agenda? No? Okay, thank you. So we need a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you. Councillor Rhodes, Councillor Campbell, all in favor. Thank you. And the only thing that we have on our agenda this morning is a curbside collection request for proposals, and this is Cameron Vaughn, who is the Solid Waste Management Coordinator for the Regional District. So thank you, Cameron, for coming. I heard this at RDOS last week, so this will be a good refresher for me. So and yours is a slightly different presentation here, a slightly less complicated, right? We hope.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Actually, this presentation was deferred. We didn't have enough time at our council meeting, committee meeting, to discuss this particular issue. This will be brought back to our next Environment Committee for the Regional District.
We spent about an hour the other day talking about other issues, but not particularly this one.
That's
we didn't
correct,
have time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be bringing that back in about 2 weeks at the committee meeting.
Thank you. Okay,
so
go ahead.
I just want to thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me today, and staff. My role with the Regional District is to help coordinate regional programs. This isn't a truly regional program. The Town of Vesuvius runs their own program, but we work together with Oliver, Vesuvius, Penticton, and Summerland, and Karamias to look at different options when we go to these different RFPs, or requests for proposals. Last time we did this was about 7 years ago. We worked with the Town of Vesuvius then, so we're developing a draft RFP now, and that'll be going out sometime later in March. And we're looking at working with the Town of Vesuvius again to get better pricing for these curbside services that provide garbage collection, recycling, and yard waste collection in the Town of Vesuvius. So that's why I'm here today. So I'll just quickly go through what I'm going to discuss today. Multi-material BC, I think you guys might be well aware of that. Organics collection, which I'll touch on briefly. There is an update I can provide that we went, and on Thursday we actually passed a resolution to proceed on. Carts, cameras, alternative fuels, and then the request for proposal and what we're trying to get in that document. So Multi-Material BC, I was set up, I started in 2014. Town of Vesuvius is part of that, the Regional District is as well. Just to give you kind of how much money's coming in each year, we're over $400,000 for just the Regional District, rural areas. I'm not sure what the money is here, but it's probably in the hundreds of thousands. It's a significant amount of our budget that has allowed us to reduce the fees for our rural customers. MMBC determines what the payments are. It determines what the materials are collected. We just sign a contract, and it's a 5-year contract. Payments and fines are geared to reduce contamination, and that's something that is a concern for us because we do see that contamination levels are over the 3% that's required for our contract. And by having that over 3%, there is the potential for MMBC to fine us on our recycling loads. So all of the contracts across BC that I'm aware of expire in November 2018. MMBC has told me that they will not give us any details until fall of 2017, so about 9 months away. Some of the questions that we have is the radically change of pricing. Contamination continues to be an issue for MMBC. They're seeing above 10% of the materials that they collect are not recyclable, or at least not, if they're not recyclable, they're not the recyclables that should be in that recycling container. So they are concerned that our mixed bag collection programs, like our current blue bag program or a future cart program, there's more chances of contamination. The programs that they like the best are called blue box programs, and those are programs where there's a separate box for your paper and cardboard and another box for your packaging, your metal containers, your plastic containers, and your coated paper containers. So by having those two separate containers, it's sorted at the curb and they get a lot less contamination, but it's a much higher cost to do that collection. So when we run those numbers, it's a lot easier for our rural areas, for the RDOS, to look at doing a commingled collection where all the materials are in one bag, because then you can send out one truck that can collect garbage on one side and recycle on the other. And that's what we currently run now, is a split truck system. But what our concerns are is that MMBC, if we're not knowing all the different numbers or knowing what the fines might be in the future, it's hard for us to say this is the direction that we're going to go because of MMBC. In terms of our RFP process, we've eliminated MMBC as a variable So we're not looking at variables such as MMBC taking over the program. We're not looking at going to a cart-based system. We're going to continue on either doing what we're doing now or additionally a cart-based service that I'll be talking about in a second. So we're not looking at any major changes for the MMBC program, but those are the so we have to think about it, but unfortunately, because there's no new information, we're just going to look at the RFP as being what's best for our communities, not what's best for MMBC, even if that may end up costing us more money down the road. Continue on. So organics, we have about 65% of British Columbians are now under an organics ban. So that's Metro Vancouver, Capital Regional District, and Nanaimo. Other areas are looking at it. We are certainly looking at it as well. So we studied options for both residential and commercial users that create food waste. We're looking at the collection program for that starting in the upcoming contract. This one. So we have lots of different options across BC as examples. We're not beholden to any one collection method to collect organics at this time. So what we have is in Nanaimo, they supply a small green bin. You can see the gentleman lifting up there. That is similar to the system that we have now. You have North Vancouver. They mix their yard waste in with their food waste, but they don't supply a container. Residents are provided a sticker to put in a garbage can, or they can put out paper bags, similar to our yard waste collection system now, where there's yard waste mixed with food waste. We have West Vancouver. They keep their yard waste separate from their food waste by providing that bin. And then you have City of Vancouver, which has a large yard waste bin that they provided to their residents, and you can mix your food waste in there. And you can see in the City of Vancouver, they also take mixed paper, yard waste, and meats and bones. So what we're looking at is expanding our collection program for organics in the near future. We need to have a site. That site has not been determined yet. We have 2 sites now that are now on public record. One is in Highway 3A. It's on the Penticton Indian Band. A locatee owner has come forward to talk to us about siting it on their property. And then the District of Summerland landfill is another site for a regional compost site as well. We've also been in discussion with potentially the Oliver landfill taking on a role for doing residential only materials. I'll be coming back and doing a more detailed presentation on the organics. You're certainly welcome to ask me questions today. But as part of our solid waste management plan amendment process, I'll be coming back and doing a formal presentation just on organics in the near future. So I'm not as prepared today to speak on that issue. Carts. The City of Penticton moved last year to start a cart program. They now have carts in all of the single-family homes across Penticton. They provide 3 carts. There's a garbage cart, a recycle cart, and a yard waste cart. There's different options in terms of what the sizing. You can pay more for larger bins. For recycling, there's no extra charge for a larger bin. So if you need a larger bin, that's covered under the MMBC program to supply that larger bin. But if you want a larger yard waste bin or if you want a larger garbage bin, there are extra charges in the City of Penticton program. Trucks that run currently for the City of Penticton were retrofitted, but when they look at the new contract in 2018, they'll be looking for brand new trucks that are designed specifically to collect these type of carts. And those trucks will be different than what the trucks are that we're using now. We have currently a semi-automated side load truck. They'll be looking at a fully automated side load. That's a little hand comes out and grabs it and drops it. Right now we have a semi-automated side load where the driver gets out of the vehicle, walks around, sticks the cart onto a little finger that grabs it and drops it. It's a lot slower process. They believe that there'll be potentially a 20% reduction in the amount of time they need to spend by doing a cart-based program, and that's just in the City of Penticton. So they're going to go from 5 days to potentially 4 days of collection because they're going to be a lot more efficient by using these designed side loaders for fully automated collection. So just go to the next slide. So when we looked at the RDOS, and I don't speak for the town of Vesuvius, but we've had discussions, and it sounds very similar. We just realized we don't have the staff to deliver carts. We're not experts on carts, and we're not going to be able to maintain those carts with our current staff. So we recognize that the RDOS in the rural areas can't do it. So what we're looking at in the RFP process is for the contractors to do an all-in pricing, where they would look at the price for a current service. So that current service is you supply your bag, you supply your can, you supply your own cart, it gets collected exactly as it would be now, versus a cart-based system where the contractors would supply the trucks, they would supply the carts, they would deliver the carts, and they would maintain the carts. So looking at the 2 all-in prices, our current process versus this cart process, we can then compare those 2 to see what the prices might land on a yearly basis per home. At the end of the contract period, which we're looking at a 7-year contract period right now, that's a general timeline for how long these trucks take to break down, because they are used every day, almost 6 days a week, 5 days sometimes, but sometimes 6 for some of these trucks. So they do break down after about 7 to 10 years. So our contract period is 7 years plus a 1-year extension in the RFP. So we're looking at getting the bins would be ours at the end of the contract period. So the price would be including the cost of the bins, but after 7 years we would then own those bins and they would revert to the local government that we envision being the town of Vesuvius or the regional district. And that way that the contractors don't have to take the bins away at the end of their contract period. And generally those bins are amortized over a 5-year period or a 10-year period. So 7 years seems like a good amortization level for those bins. So we're going to request the option in our RFP. It's just to compare the pricing and the savings. Savings generally comes down to the WorkSafe BC. There's about 6 workers for Progressive Waste that have been on workers' comp in the last 2 years, mainly because of injuries from cans. When you lift those garbage cans and you're pouring it into the truck, something gets stuck and jars you. That can cause an injury, and there has been numerous injuries. So they're spending tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on just WorkSafe claims. As well, the cart-based system is slightly faster. We're going to compare that to the extra cost of having that capital, those carts out on the streets. So this will give us a good all-in comparison pricing. They are used across, the wild-safe resistant carts is more for the rural areas, but we are looking at that for some of our communities because bears, people that store waste outside especially, can attract animals. So that we do have some wildlife-resistant carts that we're looking at, mainly for the rural areas around Penticton and potentially the District of Summerland. And there are different, if this is something the town of Vesuvius is going to look at, because we will have pricing on what those wildlife-resistant carts cost, that will be available for the town of Vesuvius. Some of the issues we see with carts, and I discussed this on the weekend with dozens of people, long driveways is a major issue, especially in the rural areas. Garbage stored outside unprotected. Contamination for recycling yard waste and garbage can go up, so just because people have convenient bins. The horror story I heard on the weekend is that in downtown Penticton, especially in their commercial areas, people are dropping needles into their recycling. So the contamination it can be somewhat different with carts. It's something that we recognize. It's probably not a big threat, but it's something that we've got to think about. If we have different communities doing different systems, so if the city of Penticton has decided they're doing carts, they are different than us right now. The difference is in, if we look at trucks in our new contract that's coming up, if we have different areas doing different things, they can be higher costs. For example, if Area A decides that they're going to do carts and the town of Vesuvius doesn't, the truck that would come down to do Area A would be different than the one that does Vesuvius. And that just means that there isn't the same overlap and potential for economies of scale when there's different trucks on the road. So harmonizing as much as possible has the potential to save money. And then we'll be discussing carts this spring. As part of a greater public consultation on organics, and also on some landfill issues. We'll be discussing carts with residents, and I intend to be kickstarting that fairly soon. We just got our budget passed on Thursday, so I'll be looking at getting that going in the next couple of months. That will include an open house in Vesuvius, and me coming back to discuss organics at a larger scale when I come back probably later this spring as well. So I'll be asking to come back, and you'll see me again a second time this spring. So. Cameras, and this is an issue that for some residents they feel this is a privacy concern. Cameras are often associated with cart-based trucks because the people don't get out of the vehicles. For hazards, hazards can include things on fire. They can include propane tanks. They can include things that are heavy or might break the equipment. So when they lift and drop into the back of the truck, the driver will be able to see what's in that cart and be able to tell what's in there. So another thing that we want to do is be able to take photos. All of the carts will have a radio frequency identification tag, RFID, and that tag will allow them to say, okay, that address put a bunch of recycling in the yard waste, or there's a bunch of garbage in the recycling, or there's lots of recycling in the garbage. Mm-hmm. So when they take the picture of it, that would then be available to be sent to a local government. Local government would then be able to send a letter to that property owner and say, hey, there's a problem here. We've identified it. Please, we need your help to fix that. Central Okanagan has done that, and they found it's fairly effective because, on average, 90% of people are doing it pretty good. Like, no one's perfect. We certainly see problems in the recycling, garbage, and yard waste for most properties. But where there's serious concerns, then we would be able to address them directly to that home. So if we start to see concerns like propane tanks, for example, in garbage, which has been a problem lately, then we'll be able to address that. And that's one of the things that we'll be using these cameras for. But it is an issue because some people say, hey, you're looking at my garbage, that's an invasion of my privacy. It's no different than it is now. The drivers are looking inside the cans, they're looking inside the recycling, they're looking inside the yard waste because they're looking for contaminants and they're also looking for risks like and hazards. So the cameras are just, because they can't get out of the vehicle, they're not supposed to, they're going to be looking in the cameras and they'll be able to take photos of it as well. So we're looking at alternative fuels, and this is a picture of a slow-filled natural gas. There seems to be a number of different alternative fuels out there. There's biodiesel, which includes some naturally, I don't know how they do it, but it's not just straight diesel out of the ground. They add some natural diesel. There's propane. And when we look at these different options, they can emit less particles. They can have quieter trucks. So when we look at this, we'll be asking them to bring forward some options for alternative fuels. The trouble with alternative fuel vehicles is it can take longer for it to get on the road. One of the reasons we want to go to request for proposals early this spring is so that we can award and give a year for the vehicles to be on the road. So it takes about 12 months for those vehicles to come from somewhere in the States usually. They're built to spec, they're brought to Canada. So 12 months is what we've been told is a reasonable timeline to make sure that the vehicles are on the road. Diesel trucks probably take about 6 months. So one of the reasons we want to get this done and know who our contractor is going to be a year in advance is so we have time to make the transition, but also to allow this new equipment to get on the road. So we're looking at our contracts all expiring, and this is Osoyoos, Oliver, Penticton, Summerland, Karamias, and the RDOS area, expiring June 30th, 2018. We're looking at going out this spring, hopefully this month, and we'll be awarding hopefully June or July. It provides a 1 year to get the new trucks on the road. And again, the Multi-Material BC questions that I have in terms of what the fines might be or the pricing might be in their new contract period, unfortunately we don't know that information. So we're going to move forward a bit blind on MMBC, but we don't really have a lot of power over MMBC. They're a provincial group. They basically say take this money or walk. So at this point, I think we should look at what the best things are for our communities and what our residents want, and then whatever MMBC gives us, that's what we'll have to take, unfortunately. Just a recommended approach. Certainly is a lot of communities and rural directors that want to make sure they have this final say over everything that they do. That's exactly how how politics works. You guys have your own autonomy in terms of how things go forward. But just a reminder that harmonization services between jurisdictions will save money. If we work together at a regional level and a community level and a municipal level, we can then look and see how these services can be combined. So it's kind of the same approach throughout the areas. And that doesn't mean that one group has more power over the other. It means we need to talk on how we're going to harmonize it. Each area requiring special trucks may cost more money. So for, I think, the town of Osoyoos, I think carts might make a lot more sense here. You guys have shorter driveways. More urban settings, carts seem to work a lot better. For our rural customers, though, it may be telling them, well, because Osoyoos has gone this way, we think we should also go this way, even with your longer driveways. So it does mean that that electoral areas might have to think about carts as well. And then just strongly consider working together. I've seen the regional district and the municipalities work together, and it works really well. And when we're not, it might cost more money for everybody. So, again, just as we move forward, we've had a very good working relationship with Jim and with Barry in terms of developing the RFP. So I can only say great things about how things are going forward now. But when the rubber hits the road, it's always hard to sort of see that. That's why I really think public consultation is important to get done this spring, so that as political people, you guys can see what your constituents are saying. We'd like to work with the town of Osoyoos to do an online survey to sort of see where people are going in terms of what they think about carts, as well as organics and some of the other issues that we'll be talking about this spring as part of our solid waste management planning process. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Cameron. It's always you're so passionate about what you do, and you can answer every question, I'm sure. So thank you for working with all of the areas. I had two things that I just wanted to, and then we'll certainly let the rest of council ask questions. One is if the carts, whatever is being used, have a 7-year shelf life approximately, does that mean that thousands of carts are going to end up in the landfill in 7 years, and are they recyclable?
And that's a great question. So the amortization period is generally 7 years, just so it gets booked and then the capital asset is paid for. What we're seeing is between 10 and 15 years on the average cart.
Okay.
In the RFP, because Penticton has been a great help on this, because they've already gone through all this and they've seen, it's a lot of work to implement carts. And that's why we want to put this on the contractors, because then it's an all-in price. There's no hidden costs that staff are going to be out there doing a lot of work. We want the contractors to be responsible for pretty much everything that's associated with the cart program. Generally, those carts last 10 to 15 years, though, so that's why we want to purchase them at the end. But we saw amortization schedules in, say, Central Okanagan between 5 and 10 years. And then we saw City of Penticton actually pay outright because they built up a reserve. So there may be that option for communities, and Osoyoos may have a reserve that they can expend on this. I'm not sure. But if there is, then maybe you can buy those carts up front and save money.
And then what happens to them when they need to go to a landfill and because they're plastic, right?
Yeah.
Then can they be recycled? I mean, can they go? Is that what you would do with them if your cart was?
It's when you have carts brought in. What's hard to recycle is a mixture of different materials.
No, I meant the actual cart itself. Yeah.
So the cart remains the property of either the contractor or the local government. And there has been ways to recycle those carts.
Okay.
They are valuable plastics. The value may not be that high. It might be cheaper to put in the landfill. So at that time, as carts come in and they're being, they're end of life, what we don't see is carts coming off all at once. What we generally see is that they wear out. And the wear out process could be day one for some of the lemons. And then for the good carts, you're looking at 10 to 15 years. Some carts might last 20 years, some carts might last 8 or 9. So you do see a regular changeover, and that will have to be part of your budget. And like any capital asset, there will be a changeover process for that. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is that you said that presumably that drivers of the trucks, if they pick up the carts on a hand, would not have to get out of their truck. But that would require people to actually put their bins in the right spot, facing the right way, wouldn't it? And that doesn't always happen. So I can see this being a huge learning curve for people to figure out where they should be putting it. And I'm sure that drivers are going to have to get out of their trucks quite often to either adjust it or turn it around or put it in the right spot. Does that make sense? Or?
The main issue we saw in Penticton for their implementation, because they did a pretty good job in educating people on where to put it, and you really put it where your garbage can goes now, so there isn't a big difference on that. Sometimes there is an adjustment, say for small cul-de-sacs.
Yes.
Generally, the carts have arrows that say point this towards the curb.
Okay.
The problem that they're seeing is the distance factor, because they have a little hand that comes out.
Yes.
There needs to be about a meter, and they're saying an arm width between a cart that may be here and a cart that's there. Residents are placing them too close together.
Okay.
So that's the main issue that they're seeing is to ensure that residents learn. So yeah, there is an education curve, and the drivers get out of the vehicle and sticker it, and they can also advise right now the City of Penticton to contact them directly by mail or to contact them by coming to their property and talking to them if they see issues in those carts.
Okay.
So yeah, there is definitely a role when that new program starts. Any new program,
Yes.
there's a learning curve.
Absolutely.
But as a resident of Penticton, it's pretty straightforward because we already do it. We already have garbage recycling and yard waste. So placing out your carts, except for the space issue, I haven't really seen that many issues in Penticton. Contamination has been an issue, but the drivers aren't coming in contact with it. Whereas with bags, we have had a couple of drivers with Progressive Waste come in contact with sharps. So
Okay.
the work safe issue seems to be reducing those kind of contamination issues. But yeah, it seems straightforward to implement. It isn't, and I think you've kind of caught on. Staff will be involved in the rollover process. What we've done in the RFP is we've looked at the education programming being paid for by the contractors. So they would be supplying the literature. They would be supplying it when they deliver the carts. What regional district has committed to, and I think what local governments asked them to commit to, is a little bit more of an additional advertising budget for that
Sure.
that time, which would be mainly advertising in the paper, making sure your calendars are up to date, so the calendars have information,
Sure.
and probably doing mail-outs because we have their personal information, all of our residents, whereas we will never give that to the contractors. So
Okay.
we should have probably budget a bit more in terms of newsletters and mail-outs to our residents and their peers because the contractors can't do it. We're the only ones that they can.
Good. Thank you very much. Councillor Rhodes. You were first.
Thank you, Member Koroff. Well, once again, Cameron, thank you very much. Your information that you bring to us is always great, and we all learn from it and that kind of thing. I'd like you to know that I'm a supporter of no organics being picked up at all. I always have been. I know it's a dream, but in some communities it's been introduced and works very well, and certainly reduced it an awful lot. How we'd ever do that in our community, I have no idea, but certainly you have my support in that particular area. But I wanted to ask a question about MMBC and the comment that you have about $411,000 being returned back to the community. MMBC, I was always very skeptical about it when we went through the debate process on whether we were going to join in, and it went right down to the last minute. I think our support went in about 20 minutes before the deadline. Often when money is returned to a community through those programs, there's always a cost that's attached to it, and I'm wondering if you have any information you could share with us about how successful the financial aspect of MMBC is.
I would let Barry.
MMBC contributes about $36,000 a year to the town. They pay for recycling pickup. As yet, we have not been fined. They've been doing assessments of our loads. They've been expressed concerns about the level of contamination. So once that level of contamination, and the level of contamination mainly is at the landfill, at our big bin program, where people, were doing their due diligence. They feel good for years and years about putting everything in the blue bag and then taking it down to the landfill and throwing it into the bin. Well, that's not good enough for MMBC. They require additional sorting, and that's where it becomes contamination, where people think they're doing a good job, even though we have all the signs and all the the direction. It's still a level of contamination in that particular program. So it'll be interesting to see what MMBC comes out with. I don't know how they're going to let you know what the results are in fall, because they have a conference set up in fall, in November, which is another public consultation process. They got a survey out now asking for feedback on the MMBC program. I've asked our Director of Operations to complete that survey, and we'll see how it goes. But I do know that there are a few communities that chose not to join MMBC, but they now came back to MMBC and requested that they become part of the program. So that's kind of, unless there's something else I can add to that.
Is there a cost attached to that? It's not a gift that falls out of the sky. There is a cost that's attached.
They give us $36,000 as long as we pick up. We pay for the contracted services of picking up recycling. There's no other strings attached other than the level of contamination. So we've been able to, within our system, we've developed a reserve off of that MMBC program, knowing that down the road we may be going to carts, or there may be something we want to do within our waste management program. But there are, the only strings attached to the program is that you meet their sorting requirements, and I think it's 3% contamination. Yeah, something like that. And I think last we heard we're something around 10%.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good.
So you're saying that it's worse than we think?
Well, what we're finding lately is what's been happening, because we have a big 40-yard container, right, and that's what you're supposed to throw your blue bags and stuff like that in. What people are doing, because they're throwing other garbage into that 40-bin container, as well as their recycling. So we're getting lamps, furniture, batteries, all sorts of stuff that should not be in the recycling. They're just chucking everything into the bin, and then once it's in the 40-foot container, it contaminates the whole bin, because you can't get inside the container to actually take the garbage out, if you will, and leave the recycling. So we're currently having some issues with that, and it's really hard to police that unless you had a person standing there 24/7 guarding it. It's really hard to police people from doing that. I'm looking at a different way of collecting that recycling for us. It just costs money. So.
I can, and add also that we get paid by MMBC to run our residential pickup and then we get paid on a separate contract for providing that bin service at the landfill. So at some particular, and it's a very similar service that's handled by the recycling center downtown. They have the ability to do more sorting there because people come in and they put it into the various bins. At some particular point in time, one of the options is to say, well, if our fines exceed our revenues, then maybe it's time to shut down the project, and then just turn all that type of recycling to a residential pickup and to the private sector.
Okay, Councillor Younger.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor McCordoff, and thanks, Cameron, for this very interesting presentation. How do you see your proposal moving forward with commercial versus residential? As in, right now, we have bins commercially, and so you will continue to have the truck with the bins, or how is that going to work?
Well, I can let the town of Vesuvius speak to that, but we don't provide any commercial collection that I'm aware of.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Okay.
But
Don't know.
In
Because
town
it's
here,
quite
yeah.
different here.
Yeah. There's two things that we don't provide. One is commercial. That's up to the business to set up a pickup. The second is we don't do any multifamily pickups. That's also on a separate contract that any multifamily units have to pick up set up their own contract.
So that would be the Stratus. The Stratus
That's right.
would as we get progressive waste to pick our bins up, then we would just continue doing that.
Yes.
Because I just see a lot of issues with the bins that they're collecting now with contaminated items, and I just wondered if that was up to the municipality to control that, or if
No.
it was a carrier, progressive waste.
Well, Your Worship, just the regional district has just applied. We're spending about $75,000. We're working with a consultant to come in and actually speak. They'll actually be coming and trying to be a delegation to the council. They're working at all the communities in the RDOS, and they're looking first at discussions with waste haulers and stratas and businesses to look at the contamination in those front-end bins. The Central Okanagan Regional District did a really good program for 3 years. Their first year was consultation and audits and discussion and developing ideas. Their second year was draft implementation, and then their third year was implementation. And what they really focused on was ensuring that everyone had access to different options for their recycling, be it business or multifamily. Then at the landfill, they really went for the fines. So they really looked at those loads and said, hey, if you're not putting a cardboard bin at your business and you're putting cardboard in the garbage, fines are coming. So there's many different options, though. Like there's options where commercial businesses have come together, like the Downtown Penticton Association, and developed recycling programs just for them that works for them. So those might be other options. So we can look at the carrots and the sticks, and that's why we've hired this firm called Green Step. And I was just speaking to them last week, and they want to appear as a delegation in front of you to discuss this with the Vesuvius Council, just to make sure you guys are aware of what they're trying to do in the community, because at a regional level, we've got them in every community: Princeton, Oliver, Vesuvius, Kearney.
So in the bins, can you put a plastic bag in the bins? In your carts, in the carts. Are we going to be able to put plastic bags in the cart? Or do you just take your little white bag and throw it in the cart, and all those little white bags will just get dumped when the truck comes by?
The problem with plastic bags right now is they're not collected, but if they're a container, like if they contain your recycling, then we would still be allowed to collect them. So a clear bag or a clear blue bag, I believe under our cart program may or may not be acceptable. Generally, we would ask people not to use those plastic bags at all, because it's a lot easier to say, please, no plastic bags in our recycling, as it's no longer a collectible through MMBC. In terms of garbage, plastic bags are presently accepted in the garbage. They're not currently banned by our landfills. Town of Vesuvius may have different rules and regulations at the landfill.
So the penalty will be if you don't buy a cart? What will happen? You just your garbage won't get picked up?
Yeah, no one would be required to buy a cart. The carts would be supplied through the contractor, as this is envisioned, if we go that direction. Certainly, if we go the current direction, people are allowed to use cans, they're allowed to use bags. They can also use carts currently, as long as there's a bar halfway up the front side. for their single-family collection program. So that's already, you're already allowed to do that. But what we would do if a cart-based program, to be uniform, the contractor would supply all the carts to all the single-family homes. They would be uniform. There would be different sizes, but they would be a similar size or width, so that the vehicle could collect it and drop it. So no homeowner would be required to buy it, but the cost of that would, of course, be built into their bill. And I believe you guys bill annually for your, I'm not sure how you guys bill
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is annually, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell,
Thanks.
and then Councillor King.
Thank you. Speaking to the cart-based program, you talked about the cameras in the vehicles and the RFID chips. What are the repercussions for contamination that's caught ongoing, or what does that look like?
It would be up to the town of Vesuvius to determine what they do.
Right.
You guys have your own contract. At the Central Okanagan, what they generally do is use it as an education tool. So they send letters, and if the letters aren't successful, they actually come and visit the property. And if the person isn't there, they leave a door hanger. And then at the end, if they just can't get it right, sometimes those carts are then removed. But that's very rare. I believe that they service tens of thousands of people, groups, way more than we do. I think they've only removed a few carts.
Right.
But if that happens, yeah, you have to take those steps, especially if it's hazardous material,
Right.
like propane tanks or burning materials or asbestos. Like there's
Right.
so much, like we are now, the way our landfills are being hit by WorkSafe PC, we have to think more and more about things that we didn't have to think about before, like building materials. So when we look at these things, each community will decide what they do, but the worst case scenario is you remove the bins from the property and they're just not part of your service.
Have any communities that you're aware of gone to the other end of that and incentivied anything as far as households that are doing this perfectly and doing it? Have you seen that happen? Or?
The problem that we're seeing is Weights and Measures Act. So what we've seen in the States is they actually do pay as you throw, I think it's called. In general, it's what pay as you go, pay as you throw.
Right.
So you only pay for the waste that you put out. And then there's ways of not getting charged for your recycling if it's perfect, for example. So there are examples. The Weights and Measures, though, in Canada doesn't allow for the arms that are used on trucks to meet their standards for us to be able to charge by weight. So we can record those weights, and that might be something that contractors are able to provide.
Right.
So they could actually RFID tag the weight of each and every bin as long with the photo. But we may not be able to charge by that, unlike some places in the States that have
Right.
done that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor King?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. If a cart gets damaged, do you replace it, or does the household have to pay to replace it?
It does depend on how it's damaged. So if it's damaged by the collector, or if it's damaged just by wear and tear, then there would be no charge to the resident. It's just a normal change-out process, and that's part of maintenance.
Right.
If it's damaged by negligence or damaged by something else, then potentially the homeowner may be on the hook to pay for that damage. As it's not their property, it would be the property of either the contractor or the local government that owns that bin. That being said, if it gets stolen, it wouldn't be on them because the RFID tags are used to then find that cart. And that's what the city of Penticton has is people that live downtown sometimes take carts for a ride. And so they use the RFID tags to find those carts and bring them back to the proper property. So the property owner would not, because it's not their cart, the property owner would be responsible for that loss. So for theft or loss or maintenance or damage by the contractor, wear and tear, no charges to them. So if a wheel pops off, they just phone in and say, hey, my wheel popped off. Someone would drive out, put the wheel back on, and fix it for them. And that's theirs. But if they run over it with their own vehicle...
That's what I see happen.
No,
Yeah.
Jim's just asking because he tends to back over his
Which then there's room for discussion on how that, and that might be charged back to the resident. And it would
And
be
the
case
other
by
question,
case.
have you ever heard of any towns where the arms have actually damaged cars? I know you mentioned about far apart for two bins, but in short driveways happens to be where I live, and you got a car there, and then you got all gravel
Yeah.
to pull that bin over the gravel. Is going to be interesting.
The cars isn't the main issue because that's pretty easy for the camera to see. The thing I've heard of the most is electrical lines because they bring it up fairly high to drop it, so they can nick an electrical line. So there will be training and insurance, and the contractors will be responsible for all of that, and we'll have to make sure that they're well aware of that. And that will be my main fear is electrical lines. But yes, any vehicle damage, because right now the vehicles could be damaged. Like just a few weeks ago, a truck did a turnaround in a gravel driveway and it was wet, so it damaged the driveway. The company had to go out and fix it. So the company will have to have insurance. They'll have to deal with any of the liabilities in terms of collection. And that's why this is why my preferred approach as the coordinator for the regional district is this all-in pricing, where we don't take on the risk of the collection. It's all on the collector. We take on other risks, like MMBC, for example. Like if MMBC fines us, we don't fine the collector, because it's so we're trying to the RFPs. These things are designed to identify risks, because that's cost. And the cost would be on them if they damage a car, if they hit an electrical line, if they do anything else. So that's all on them.
And how close to the curb does the cart have to be for the arm to, how far can the arm reach out?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly how far it is. So parking may be an issue, but we're going to have to look at that. And that's going to have to be, that's why the contractors are the experts, and they're going to have to make sure that they understand. We're not going to stop where people can park. But generally what happens is if the carts are able to get to an area where there's no vehicles, it's very straightforward for them to come in and grab it. But I've seen them extend pretty far, but it does depend on the type of equipment they use.
And if you miss a pickup, do I get a rebate?
If you don't place out your materials, no.
I've done everything correct, but it's snowing and your truck's not going to get close enough that the arm won't reach.
I can't speak for the town of Vesuvius. You guys
I'm talking about you.
Yeah, in the Area A or Area C, we would not rebate on one missed collection because of snow. We live in a rural area, and we just expect people to sort of expect that. When drivers can't get to Anarchist or can't get to Capula or can't get to somewhere else, then there is a recognition that phone in, let us know that your materials were missed, and then we'll try our best to get back there next week. I've seen that where there's been really bad roads, especially in Area C, then over a month, then we have looked at potentially doing rebates and rebating those people because they haven't had the collection for over a month. In that case, though, generally we send out a 4x4 pickup truck and we just do those collections ourselves.
And you said you can have small or large buildings in the community? It's not all dictated by all large or all small? Generally what we see is a fairly small 120-liter cart, and I didn't bring them today, unfortunately, because when I've been here before. Is that the small one?
Yeah, it's
yeah, I know what they look like.
Yeah, and then the 240s are generally used for recycle and yard waste, and then people can get the 360s, which is a bit big, and you could put. It's big. Someone said you could put dead bodies in there. When I was at the home show.
We don't want that.
I just relate to the town being seniors.
Wondered about
Can a person request two small ones?
Yes, yeah, and that's what we've seen as well. It's the city of Penticton it's nice that they went forward in a way because they've seen it all. And they have had seniors say, hey, I just want a small recycle bin. But generally what we find is that the garbage can is a relatively average size. Yeah, you might not use it all the time, but I know even seniors have people come to visit them in the Vesuvius in the middle of summer. So that larger can, still not 120 liters, might get used up that 2 or 3 times in the summertime. And then the larger cart for recycling, someone said, I don't fill it up every 2 weeks, but if I miss a collection, like you said, if I forget to put it out in recycling week, then that gives me 4 weeks for that recycling bin to fill up. So in general, like for 90% of people, those carts are going to be okay. And where that just doesn't work, we can make sure that those arrangements are made. City of Penticton has a special program for people with disabilities, and they do pay extra for that. It's only for about 8 or 9 homes, but they did provide that as well. But if you can get your bag out there, these are on wheels, and generally, I'd say 10 months out of the year in Vesuvius, you could easily get the carts out by rolling it. And it may actually be less work than lifting a can or lifting a bag.
You can't get it past the car, though, with the tight driveway.
Sometimes, yeah.
So you got to back your car out to move the garbage out.
There is going to be a transition with carts, and it's an election year as well, so.
Don't need the extra.
Do you want them to just come in your house?
The bin's about the size of that podium.
Yeah, a little bit smaller, but there's the garbage cart. But you're right, the width and the height is similar, yeah. For sure. I didn't bring any today, unfortunately, but if you guys want to see them, I can bring them down the next time I come down.
So, Cameron, can I ask, you're going to come back at some point and talk to us more about organics and the possibility of having AC, Vesuvius, and Oliver go to the Oliver landfill?
Yeah. We're opening up the solid waste management plan. It's an amendment process, so it's a very formal process regulated through the province of BC. We need to contact everybody, so the Vesuvius Indian Band, the town of Vesuvius, will be discussing. We'll send letters to them and potentially appear as delegations. Organics is certainly an issue that's we've been working on for the last 5 years. So now we've got 2 regional sites, and then the potential. And the reason we're looking at Oliver is because it's far enough away from everybody else. Whereas the Vesuvius landfill, when we had discussions, and Jim was there, the desert center is there, and you have $1 million homes just below you on the lake. So we felt the Oliver landfill might be the better place to look at a sub-regional site.
Sure.
And we'd only be looking at residential food waste.
Yeah.
Commercial food waste, we found, has most of the odor because it doesn't come in with yard waste. And businesses can create a tremendous amount of food waste from a kitchen or from a food processing place. And so what we feel is that should go to a regional site where there's all the bells and whistles of odor, whereas a residential waste coming in with yard waste, and we already have yard waste at the landfills. If we mix those together, we can potentially create a good quality compost. The town of Vesuvius, from our odor modeling, could also do their own setup at their own landfill for a very cost-effective price as well. So when we did our odor modeling, we looked at the town of Vesuvius landfill, and we found that by just taking in your residential materials from Vesuvius and Area A, you could create quality compost with that food waste at the Vesuvius landfill, but there's more risk for odor because of those. You have the desert center and the homes. Whereas Oliver, if you're just thinking about risk and the potential for anything to go wrong, if something goes wrong in Oliver, you have wineries now, and you used to have the old feedlot, which is gone now, but then you have a lot more space for that odor to dissipate. So when we looked at it at the staff level, we felt that Oliver might be a better place to bring the food waste. And you guys could continue doing your yard waste composting operation. We wouldn't be looking for that. But we would potentially take more of that yard waste from the Vesuvius landfill through the pickup of residential waste to Oliver as a potential. And that needs to be discussed. And,
Sure.
And there's no obligation on anything right now, but the obligation is coming. And when the obligation that we'll be putting on the town of Vesuvius is the local service area establishment bylaw. And we're looking at a regional bylaw. And if Vesuvius would like to ban, say, organics at their landfill, your landfill, then that would be membership of the local service area establishment bylaw would be required. And any bylaw, there's the potential for charges to be applied to your residents through taxation. So we'd like to make sure you guys are well aware of that before we proceed.
Sure.
And that's what we're looking at.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, so we have one more.
Yeah, just maybe just put some more information in terms of discussion on the handling of food waste. It will be something that will have to be discussed to a great extent, especially in the urban areas, because the discussion now is about putting food waste in with yard waste. And with a 2-week pickup of yard waste in July, August, I don't know how we're going to handle that. So it's something that we've got to do some modeling on or do some discussion on prior to any final decisions. There may be a need to do a seasonal type of process. I don't know. It's just I'm looking down the road and saying it's going to be tough in our heat.
Yeah.
But that'll be something that'll be brought to council as part of the greater discussion. Correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of the RFP, Cameron, we're looking at having a decision made by June, at the end of June of this year.
Yeah, we've been working. Jim was at our last meeting. We're looking at getting an RFP out this month, later this month, and then having those results probably by the end of March, by the end of April, and then having some pretty in-camera discussions between the different groups, because we're all kind of are in the same business. We should probably talk to each other in camera, and then being able to go to the public and do the award probably in end of June, early July. So
based on that timeline, sometime in April, we'll be bringing back to council the results of the RFP, the costing, carts versus no carts, all that type of information, so that council can make a decision as to how you want to proceed on developing a new pickup contract. And if part of that may be a broader discussion with other members, other council members from other communities, either to convince them to go one way or another to develop that common service model, so that there could be some cost efficiencies.
Well, I think that totally makes sense to try and have groups work together and see what can be, because together we're better, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the latest thing? Yes.
Your Worship, just to clarify, so most organics collections are weekly collections of organics. So yard waste and organics would be collected every week, and then you alternate between recycling and garbage. So right now, we alternate the yard waste and recycle.
Yes.
It would go to weekly collection of organics, and the garbage would be every 2 weeks, and the recycle would be every 2 weeks. And that's what City of Vancouver and most of Metro Vancouver did. So just to clarify what we're considering in terms of organics collection.
That would
Okay,
help
that's
with
news
the
to
other
me.
issue about, that people seem to bring up all the time about rats and animals that get into it. So it would certainly make more sense to have it weekly.
That's what we'd recommend is a weekly
Yeah.
collection. And so that we would have the same trucks that we have now that are general split trucks, and they would just shift over the recycle to the weekly and the yard waste to the weekly with the food waste. Food waste doesn't take up a lot of space, so the
Yes.
volume isn't that much different than yard waste. And by collecting it every week, you actually reduce the amount of yard waste you collect per collection because you're collecting it 1 week instead of 2 weeks. So it's what most communities have done, and it seems to be working for them.
Well, thank you very much, Cameron. Your wealth of information, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time. Come back any time that you need to give us some more information on this, because obviously this is a big issue that we're all dealing with. So
Great.
thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Could I have, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda. I need a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much. Councillor King, Councillor Campbell, all in favor. Should we take 5? Okay.